Hello, I'm Cade Tompkins. This is what makes art great. Today we're going to speak about glass and artists that employ this medium. What makes art great and what makes glass great? We're here at the Museum of Art and Design in front of this fantastic collection of studio art goblets. They're really the history of humankind. Early glass has been discovered as far back as 3600 BC in Mesopotamia. There was also glassmaking in North Syria along the coast, as well as Egypt. And that's important to know because glass needs silica, and silica is sand. And many coastal communities in the ancient world developed glass both as a utilitarian and ceremonial moment. You can see in goblets, of course, we think about ceremony and sharing glasses of fine wine with our friends and family. Fast forward to the Venetian glass movement, which some of these goblets are inspired by. There was an important island named Murano, and they kept their glassmaking very secretive for many, many years until the advent of American studios. American glass really came to the fore with Louis Comfort Tiffany and Steuben. They were factories filled with creative artisans who made glass works for many of the prominent families of the United States. Also in America, in the 1940s and 50s, American architect Frank Lloyd Wright began to use stained glass windows that he created and designed in many of his buildings. This was a wonderful combination of function and utility. From that point on, the idea of studio art glass really came into full force. In the 1970s, Harvey Littleton set up a glass studio at the University of Wisconsin, and it was from there that many of his students went on to create glass studios at various universities across the country. Many of those students were looking at their goblets right here. It's interesting to note how artists learn from one another. A teacher-student position is very critical, especially when you're dealing with something like glass. Many established artists working in the medium of glass have learned from the masters, and this is a very specific skill that gets passed down from person to person, teacher to student over the years. And a foundry is a really collaborative space because there's thousands of degrees Fahrenheit and lots of activity. Working in a foundry is exhilarating, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The artists working in the foundry must be very careful, as well as having great skills in order to handle the heat and the chaos that happens in a glass foundry. We're here in the exhibition of Brian Clarke's magnificent stained glass. When one thinks of stained glass, one thinks of medieval churches, but here in the hands of Brian Clarke, there's absolutely this wonderful feeling of pop and color and joy in all of these screens. Artists are continually inspired by nature and the forms of nature, such as these jellyfish as they're floating through the sea. Here you can see the artist is incorporated flying cranes and beautiful figurations of birds. I think that the artists are fascinated by the forms and shape created by nature. We're here in the middle of Beth Lipman's 10-year survey at the Museum of Art and Design. We're thinking about what makes art great, taking an ordinary medium such as glass and blowing it up to this incredible installation piece that Beth created. The title of it is Laid Time, Table and Cycads. On the top, there's a dialogue with still life and landscape and all objects that are humans, such as books, drawings, goblets, and other remains of humans. Underneath the table is phantasmagoric landscape of plants and ferns that are really from the time past, thousands of years ago. And as you can see in this piece, there's a top and bottom. The cycads are growing up through the table and putting the two worlds together in one piece. Drives Beth's work is the idea of permanence and mortality and temporality. She's very interested in the Dutch still lifes because they were dealing with the same issues of what's lasting, what will be here when we're gone. And this piece in particular really blends plants and ferns and ginkgos from the Jurassic period with ideas of 19th and 20th century luxury. The top of the table is concerned with material goods and items that we enjoy and use every day, such as books, goblets, drawing paper, and everyday objects. And with the use of diverging plants underneath the table that went extinct many times over, it's fascinating to know that relatives of these plants exist, and Beth is illuminating for us this passage of time in her work. What makes this particular piece so astounding is that it's using a utilitarian medium, glass, for an installation that's monumental and somewhat mind-blowing in terms of thinking about one person coming up with this beautiful idea and creating a very complex installation.